Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I declare open the 418th meeting of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. The provisional agenda for the meeting has been distributed by the Secretariat for your consideration. If I hear no objections, the agenda is adopted. It's so decided. As we recently marked the 75th anniversary of the Geneva Conventions, which stand as the cornerstone of international humanitarian law, we are starkly reminded of our responsibility to protect civilians in conflict. Yes, and yet, as the world watches on, Gaza is engulfed in a relentless war, claiming over 40,000 Palestinian lives, mostly women and children, and leading to a humanitarian catastrophe with mass starvation and a total absence of basic services. The Israeli military continue raids in the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, expanding settlement construction and deepening its annexation of Palestinian territory. Palestinians face relentless large-scale ground and air assaults, now further escalating with similar abhorrent attacks on the West Bank, alongside deadly evacuation orders, violent settler attacks, arbitrary arrests, and inhuman treatment. The deteriorating situation underscores the urgent need for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and Israel's strict adherence to international humanitarian law. I have repeatedly called on Israel to respect international law and their commitments under the UN Charter to ensure the safety and security of Palestinians and UN personnel and premises. I remain concerned that the Security Council remains paralyzed and unable to secure and enforce a ceasefire in the conflict in Gaza. Against this distressful situation, Palestinians' hopes were uplifted by the historic ruling of the International Court of Justice, advisory opinion of 19th July 2024, which declared Israel's prolonged occupation of Palestinian territory since 1967 unlawful, urging its immediate end, the evacuation of settlers, and reparations for damages. The committee congratulates the State of Palestine for presenting a strong legal case based on international law. The committee takes pride in contributing to this success, including through its widely shared study on the legality of the Israeli occupation. Urgent and concerted international action must follow the court's advisory opinion. Our committee fully backs the General Assembly's efforts to implement it and urges the Security Council to swiftly address the end of this unlawful occupation. I call on all committee members and observers to support Palestine in this crucial endeavor. With those few opening remarks, we will start, as usual, our meeting with an update from the mission of Palestine. I would like now to give the floor to Ambassador Feda Abdelhadi, Deputy Permanent Observer of the State of Palestine, to provide an update on the situation in the OPT, as well as on other diplomatic developments. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and our thanks also go to the members of the Bureau and the entire committee for their efforts and solidarity as we continue to confront the grave reality in occupied Palestine as the Palestinian people continue facing Israel's genocidal assaults and the humanitarian catastrophe it has inflicted on the Gaza Strip, now spreading to the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, as you've indicated, endangering the lives of millions of Palestinian children, women, and men who are suffering under this illegal and immoral occupation and its apartheid regime. Regrettably, as we have all witnessed in recent days and weeks, in the absence of a ceasefire and any measures of accountability, Israel's extremist government has only escalated its illegal policies and practices on every front. The Israeli occupying forces are carrying on with their lethal rampage across Gaza, massacring and maiming civilians and destroying with unprecedented savagery. Their attacks by air, land, and sea continue to target homes and schools, hospitals, shelters for the displaced, and whatever churches and mosques remain standing, while also targeting UN and other humanitarian operations, threatening the lives of Palestinian civilians and the humanitarian workers desperately trying to aid the population. And this includes direct fire on humanitarian convoys, including Israeli troops shooting at a clearly marked World Food Program vehicle, and the attack on an Anira aid convoy today. And from the start of its aggression, Israel has incessantly targeted UNRWA facilities, killing and injuring families who had sought refuge under the UN flag, while at the same time pushing a libelous smear campaign against UNRWA, shockingly labeling a UN General Assembly mandated humanitarian agency as a, quote, terrorist organization, in breach of the Charter, UN resolutions, and international humanitarian law, and dangerously inciting against UNRWA staff, at least 212 of whom have already been murdered by Israel in Gaza. At the same time, Israel continues restricting and obstructing the entry of food, water, medicines, and fuel, and other essential supplies into Gaza, including hygiene supplies, further impeding humanitarian access. This has exacerbated the humanitarian crisis, now nearly 11 months in, leaving Palestinian civilians to be ravaged by starvation and famine, infectious diseases and illnesses. Diseases like polio, meningitis, and hepatitis are spreading, in addition to respiratory and skin infections and other illnesses. And this is in a place deprived of even the most basic medications to treat the sick and injured. As widely reported, a 10-month-old baby girl has already been paralyzed by the polio virus, which had been eradicated from Palestine 25 years ago. And an 11-month-old baby boy is now partially paralyzed. The virus is threatening the lives of hundreds of thousands of children who comprise the majority of Gaza's population, among them at least 50,000 infants born during the past 10 months. This makes even more urgent implementation of the Secretary General's plan to roll out a UN vaccine campaign, which is set to begin in the coming days with the participation of the WHO, UNICEF, and UNRWA, which does remain the backbone of humanitarian operations in Gaza. And we renew our gratitude to the Secretary General for his principled and urgent response to this public health crisis, and to the UN system for mobilizing rapidly to address it in the most dire of circumstances. Along with Israel's continued bombardment of Gaza and the spread of hunger and disease, these worsening circumstances regrettably also include repeated Israeli military orders demanding evacuation and forcibly displacing desperate and exhausted families over and over again. In recent days, another 300,000 plus people, among them sick, injured, disabled, and elderly persons and orphans, have been demanded to evacuate across Gaza. In just the span of the past week, Israel has issued 5 evacuation orders, vowing to strike areas to which civilians were previously told to go for safety. This is causing widespread fear and chaos, as the fact is that there is nowhere left for the population to go, with now at least 89% of Gaza under Israeli evacuation orders, cramming over 2 million civilians in the 11% of the territory left. Mr. Chair, what we are painfully witnessing in Gaza is the unraveling of humanity at the hands of this illegal Israeli occupation, and witnessing the unraveling of the rule of law, including international humanitarian law, that was created to protect civilians and avert such wanton killing and destruction and horror. Even in the face of the global demands for a ceasefire and a halt to all of these crimes, Israel does not flinch and shamelessly attempts to justify its war crimes and crimes against humanity, and even to justify genocide. Every day that passes without consequences only emboldens its impunity. As of today, the casualty figures in Gaza have reached at least 40,602 Palestinians killed and nearly 94,000 injured, the majority of victims, as you indicated, Chair, women and children. And this depravity has not been confined to Gaza, as Israel deliberately escalates its violence and repression as well in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. There, occupying forces, along with terrorist Israeli settler militias, are ramping up attacks on Palestinian civilians under the direct incitement of Israeli politicians who are threatening to wage war against the entire occupied population and vowing to do to the West Bank what has been done to Gaza. Palestinian villages, towns, cities, and refugee camps are under assault every single day, and this includes drone and other aerial strikes that have killed over 136 Palestinians, among them 41 children, in the month of August alone in the West Bank. The casualty count now in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, since October 2023 has risen to over 622 Palestinians. Thousands of Palestinians, including children, have also been illegally abducted since October, forcibly held in Israeli jails and detention centers, and exposed to the most horrific abuses, including rape, psychological torment, vicious beatings, and other forms of torture. Now Israeli officials are threatening the so-called evacuation as well of Palestinians in the West Bank, as has been done in Gaza, clearly part of this decades-long ethnic cleansing campaign. In this regard, areas in and around East Jerusalem and Bethlehem continue to be especially targeted by ethnic cleansing by Israeli settlers, as well as Israeli colonization and annexation measures. Moreover, Israeli government officials continue their reckless provocations vis-a-vis the holy sites in Jerusalem, in particular against Al-Aqsa Mosque, Al-Haram al-Sharif, with extremist Israeli minister Ben-Gvir leading this campaign with repeated incitement and incursions at the Al-Aqsa Mosque and attempts to assert Israeli sovereignty. Such dangerous provocations and violations of the historic and legal status quo breach international law and disrespect the custodianship of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan for the Muslim and Christian holy sites in the city, and must be stopped before they ignite a religious war with grave consequences. Mr. Chair, Excellencies, every single day that this abhorrent, unlawful, inhumane situation continues brings only more atrocities. We have pleaded repeatedly for a ceasefire and an end to the crimes being committed against the Palestinian people. Israel cannot be allowed to continue violating every law and every norm with impunity. The principal demands, including by this committee and its members, for a halt to all of these violations and for respect of international law and the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people must go beyond words and be accompanied by concrete action for accountability, to hold the perpetrators responsible, to bring pressure to bear for compliance with the rule of law, and to bring justice for the victims. We are convinced that this is the only way to bring an end to this unlawful situation in its entirety. Without such action and consequences, Israel will continue to believe that it can get away with its crimes, and this illegal occupation will become only more emboldened, more brutal, and criminal. While we continue to call on the Security Council to uphold its charter duties and to demand and impose a ceasefire and protect the Palestinian civilian population, In the face of the Council's continued paralysis and inability to implement its own resolutions, we must act collectively and individually in line with our international legal obligations and moral obligations. And we believe that this committee must remain at the forefront of these efforts at this most crucial juncture. In this regard, the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, rendered on the 19th of July, in addition to the provisional measures orders indicated by the court in January, March, and May in the case of South Africa versus Israel under the Genocide Convention, offer a clear path forward for accountability and justice. The court clearly determined Israel's occupation of the Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem, to be unlawful, and determined that it must end as rapidly as possible. Significantly, the court also deemed that Israel's actions in the occupied Palestinian Territory violate Article 3 of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, under which, quote, states parties particularly condemn racial segregation and apartheid and undertake to prevent, prohibit, and eradicate all practices of this nature. The ICJ clearly spelled out the obligations of Israel, of all states, and the UN under international law vis-a-vis this prolonged, continuing, internationally wrongful act and the need to bring it to an end in all of its manifestations. As regards our multilateral efforts here at the UN, the court specified that the General Assembly and Security Council are to consider the precise modalities and specific action required to bring an end as rapidly as possible to the unlawful presence of Israel in the occupied Palestinian Territory. Therefore, in the coming weeks, we will pursue follow-up action in the General Assembly in a resumed 10th Emergency Special Session to endorse and implement the ICJ advisory opinion, including through the adoption of concrete measures of accountability in line with international law and the relevant UN resolutions, including the obligation upon all states not to render any aid or assistance enabling the continued maintenance of this illegal occupation, including in regard to settlement activities. Chair, allow me to renew our gratitude to the committee for its important contribution towards our efforts in the ICJ, including the important legal study commissioned by the committee regarding the legality of the occupation that was undertaken by the Irish Centre for Human Rights of the National University of Ireland at Galway, as well as for the invaluable written submissions and participation in the oral proceedings at the ICJ by Bureau and committee members that helped towards ensuring a strong outcome in the court. We will continue to call on the committee for support to operationalize this landmark advisory opinion through initiatives at the General Assembly and Security Council, and in cooperation with the Human Rights Council Special Rapporteurs and Commission of Inquiry, and through our cooperation with civil society as we collectively mobilize efforts to uphold the rule of law and ensure justice for the Palestinian people by bringing an end to this illegal colonial occupation, the source of all the trauma, suffering, and horrors endured by our people for decades, including the genocide in Gaza, and towards ensuring the realization by the Palestinian people of their inalienable rights, including to self-determination and freedom. So we will continue to actively engage the committee as we begin a new session in the General Assembly, and we'll keep the committee updated on our efforts moving forward and renew both our appeals and gratitude for your continued solidarity and support. And I thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank the Bureau and members of the committee and the Division for Palestinian Rights for your support.
Ambassador Abdelhadi, I thank you for your comprehensive update. I would like now to open the floor for comments or questions, if any. The floor is open. I see no one requesting the floor at this point, so we can move. Who? Okay, I can see Cuba and then Namibia. Okay, Namibia, please.
Chair, thank you. I really just wanted first to get an indication if we have, I do not have the agenda in front of me, so I'm not sure if this is a point where I will deliver national intervention, or do you have another space in the program? I could simply respond now, right?
Okay, we'll have to adopt the draft report after this.
That's the time.
Maybe at that point you can take the floor. Okay, now we can move to the next item. I don't see any other one. Kuba? No, okay. We can move to the next item, which is item number 2, which is an update. Oh, no. Item number 3, actually, sorry. The consideration and adoption of the draft annual report of the committee to the GA, document A/79/35. The committee is requested to consider and adopt the draft annual report of the committee for the period going from the 1st of September 2023 to 31st of August 2024 for submission to the 79th session of the General Assembly. A copy of the draft report was circulated by the Division for Palestinian Rights ahead of today's meeting. I now have the pleasure of giving the floor to His Excellency Mr. Ahmad Faisal Mohammed, Permanent Representative of Malaysia and Rapporteur of the committee, who will introduce the annual report of the committee. Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as Rapporteur of the Bureau of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People, I have the honor of presenting the annual report of the committee for 2024 contained in document A/79/35. The report covers developments relating to the question of Palestine and the committee's work between 1st September 2023 and 31st August 2024. The report is structured in 7 chapters. Chapter 1 contains the introduction, which outlines the structure and content of the report. Chapter 2 provides a brief overview of the significant political developments during the reporting period that served as the context for the committee's work program and activities. Specifically, this chapter highlights key critical developments in the occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem, marked by intensified conflict in Gaza, widespread humanitarian crisis, and continued Israeli violations of Palestinian rights. The chapter also covers pivotal international legal actions, including the ICJ's provisional orders, advisory opinion, and the International Criminal Court's request for arrest warrants for war crimes committed in Gaza and Israel. Additionally, it addresses the growing threats to support Palestinian refugees, the paralysis of the multilateral system in effectively addressing these challenges to the international peace and security, and the ongoing international efforts in support of global recognition of the State of Palestine. Chapter 3 and 4 outline the mandate entrusted to the committee by the General Assembly and the organization of the committee's work during the year, including the composition of the committee's membership and officers. Chapter 5 details the work of the committee, as well as the activities conducted on its behalf by the Division for Palestinian Rights around 4 significant aspects of the mandate. 1, mobilization of the diplomatic community. 2, raising awareness. 3, cooperation with intergovernmental organizations, non-governmental organizations, and UN entities. And 4, capacity building. This chapter highlights the significant strides made during the reporting period, marked by active engagement and outreach by the Bureau of the Committee in support of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people. Key achievements include convening 7 Bureau and 5 committee meetings, and the delivery of 4 Security Council statements on the situation in the OPT, including East Jerusalem. The committee organized 5 conferences, including with partner CSOs, and conducted 4 outreach delegation visits with member states and regional organizations. Additionally, the committee issued 7 press statements, and its website and social media platforms continued to serve information on the situation in the OPT, including East Jerusalem, to a fast-growing international audience. Furthermore, the committee conducted 4 capacity building activities for Palestinian officials, reinforcing its commitment to supporting Palestinian governance and capacity. Chapter 6 reports on the activities of the Special Information Program of the Department of Global Communications on the question of Palestine. The last and final Chapter 7 contains the recommendations of the committee to relevant actors, specifically the following. The committee calls for a sustainable ceasefire, unrestricted humanitarian access, and the delivery of essential aid in Gaza, and for the release of Israeli hostages held since 7 October. It urges adherence to international humanitarian law to protect Palestinians, to stop the violation of Palestinian rights and dehumanizing treatment of Palestinian prisoners, and demands an independent investigation into all human rights violations and war crimes perpetrated. The committee demands that Israel, the occupying power, reverse its ongoing annexation, home demolitions, settlement expansions, and the forced displacement of Palestinians, including women and children. It welcomes the landmark International Court of Justice advisory opinion of 19 July 2024. It calls on the General Assembly and Security Council, among other demands, to urgently implement the advisory opinion and bring an end to the unlawful Israeli occupation of Palestinian territory. The committee calls on Israel to respect the status quo at the holy sites in Jerusalem, ensure peaceful religious practices, and lift the ongoing land, air, and sea blockade of Gaza. The committee urges the General Assembly and the Security Council to ensure the implementation of the long-standing parameters for peace in accordance with relevant UN resolutions in view to end the illegal Israeli occupation. It calls on the Secretary General to continue to leverage his good offices to stop the conflict in Gaza and to support efforts to define a political horizon leading to the two-state solution. The committee urges all member states and regional organizations to take a politically active role in putting an end to Israeli occupation and to achieve a just and lasting resolution to the question of Palestine. The committee strongly reaffirms its support for UNRWA and its essential role in aiding millions of displaced Palestinians, including those in Gaza. It urges donors to resume funding and calls on Israel to end its efforts to delegitimize the agency, which jeopardizes critical humanitarian work in Gaza. The committee expresses gratitude to the UN Division for Palestinian Rights for supporting its work and recommends continuing the special program of the UN Department of Global Communications for its media and public awareness support efforts. I thank you.
I thank Ambassador Faisal Mohammed for introducing the draft committee annual report 2024. I would like now to open the floor for comments and questions, if any. The way we proceed is that we are going to go chapter by chapter to ensure the Secretariat can take down any potential comments. Before doing so, I would like to give the floor to delegations that wish to make comments of a general nature on the report. And if there are comments on the general nature, I see none, so I think we can go now, start by looking at chapters 1 and 2, introduction and overview of the political context relating to the question of Palestine. Are there any comments on these first 2 chapters? If there are no comments, I can take it that the committee approves chapter 1 and 2. It's so decided. Now, chapter 3, 4, and 5, mandate of the committee, organization of work, and action taken by the committee and the Division for Palestinian Rights. Are there any comments on this section? I see none. And then I take it that the committee approves chapters 3, 4, and 5. It's so decided. Now, chapter 6, action taken by the Department of Global Communications in accordance with General Assembly Resolution 77/24. Are there any comments? I see none, so I consider that the committee approves chapter 6. It's so decided. Now, Chapter 7, conclusions and recommendations of the committee. Are there any comments? If there are none, I will take it that the committee decides that Chapter 7 is adopted. It's so decided. We have thus concluded the consideration of the draft annual report 2024. And may I take it, if there are no further comments, that the committee wishes to adopt the draft annual report of the committee 2024 for submission to the General Assembly. I see no comments and no opposition, so it's decided. I would like to take this moment to request all governments and organizations to continue to extend their full cooperation and support to the committee in the performance of its tasks, particularly in implementing the recommendations of the report just adopted, and to continue to support, in line with UN resolutions, the Palestinian people in the realization of their right to self-determination. In accordance with the established practice, the adopted report will be transmitted to the Secretary General for submission to the General Assembly. The report is scheduled to be presented to the 79th session of the General Assembly during its consideration of the question of Palestine on December 3rd, 2024. Now, at this point, we can listen to national statements. I think Namibia requested the floor. Namibia, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much, and good afternoon, dear colleagues. Let me begin by paying tribute to you, Mr. Chair, for your steadfast leadership throughout this year. I also commend the efforts of the Secretariat to support the committee's work. Namibia welcomes the report before us today and reiterates our unwavering support and solidarity with the Palestinian cause. The facts presented in the report reveal the true extent of how Israel enforces a system of domination, oppression, dispossession, crimes, and impunity for the most heinous crimes against the Palestinian people. In light of this, Namibia would like to stress the following points. First, we are deeply concerned that the ongoing Israeli atrocities in Gaza have been considered the most devastating collective punishment of civilians in modern history. In less than 1 year since the escalation of the conflict in October 2023, Israel has indiscriminately killed more than 40,000 Palestinians, mostly women and children, and thousands of others have been injured in the Gaza Strip. More than 80% of the population have been issued evacuation orders and forced from their homes, many multiple times. They face acute shortages of food, water, sanitation, and health care, the basic necessities to survive under these conditions. As a strong supporter of the judicial institution of the United Nations, Namibia demands accountability for all the violations of human rights and humanitarian principles committed against the Palestinians. And no state should make themselves complicit in Israel's violations of international law. Namibia's resolute support for Palestine has been a cornerstone of its foreign policy and respect for international law. Just 4 days ago, Namibian authorities blocked a vessel suspected to be carrying military cargo intended for Israeli use in the ongoing war in Gaza from docking in our port of Walvis Bay. Second, Namibia is concerned with the warning of an imminent elevated risk of famine across Gaza, as well as the spread of communicable diseases if the conflict continues. The report notes that food is scarce, water is at the trickle, and schools and hospitals have turned into battlefields. This catastrophic situation, including food insecurity, as a result of a shortage deliberately orchestrated to starve the population of Gaza, forms part of a systematic and widespread attack directed against the Palestinian people and committed with the intent to maintain the system of oppression and domination. We reiterate our strong condemnation of the use of starvation as a method of war and the destruction of civilian facilities by the occupying power, as they constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity. To curb this vicious cycle and alleviate the plight of the people of Gaza, Israel must give security assurances and allow unimpeded passage to distribute aid at scale across Gaza, with no denials, delays, and excess impediments. Israel has an obligation to abide by its international obligations, as war, as despicable as it can be, has rules, the international humanitarian law, and these rules are universal. Third, we reiterate our call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and in the region to ensure the protection of civilians and infrastructure. Only a truce will enable the delivery of humanitarian assistance at the scale required and provide conditions for the safe return of displaced people. My delegation would like to stress that the living conditions of the internally displaced Palestinians in Gaza, as presented in the report, where people are forced to flee again and again, pushed to the so-called safe zones, which are later bombed, is a matter of great concern and urgency. Rafah, the latest destination for well over 1 million displaced, hungry and traumatized people, crammed into a tiny sliver of land, has become another battleground in this brutal conflict. As we speak, all reports converge that there is simply no safe zone in Gaza. Fourth, Israeli settlements, seizure of Palestinian land, and demolition of homes are unlawful, although they continue to occur more frequently and violently in the occupied West Bank, including in East Jerusalem. It is clear to us that the illegal measures by Israeli authorities to deepen their occupation are enacted to deliberately deny Palestinians their basic rights, including the denial of refugees' right to return and the right to self-determination. Israel must not be allowed to continue on this path. We call on the international community, particularly the Security Council, to take concrete action that will compel Israel to halt its illegal settlement activities and genuinely commit to ending its 57 years of occupation, in line with the ICJ advisory opinions, General Assembly and Security Council resolutions. The Security Council's inaction to enforce its resolutions endangers Palestinian lives, undermines peace efforts, and jeopardizes the two-state solution. Fifth, with sadness and dismay, my delegation takes note of the fact that UNRWA has continued to operate in an increasingly violent and unstable environment, combined with financial shortfalls. In that regard, Namibia reiterates its strong condemnation of any attempts to discredit the agency. Amid armed conflict and unprecedented humanitarian crisis that have worsened the conditions and sufferings of Palestinian refugees, UNRWA remains a critical tool. We encourage the international community to sustain its support and assistance to UNRWA. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, Namibia emphasizes the urgency for a peaceful resolution to this long-standing denial of the people of Palestine to exercise their inalienable right to self-determination, to sovereignty, and to territorial integrity, and to political independence. A ceasefire and a renewed vision of a two-state solution are critical for preventing the proliferation of extremism, enabling the reconstruction of Gaza, and leading to an independent Palestinian state, a safe Israel, and a peaceful region. I thank you.
Excellency, I thank you for your very strong statement. And on a personal level, I would like really to thank you also for your very active role in our committee and in the Bureau. And in the same token also say how much we appreciate the position of Namibia on the question of Palestine. You are showing it regularly. Even last week there was a very strong statement by your government. So we really appreciate all that. And I now give the floor to the ambassador of Cuba.
Thank you very much, dear Ambassador and friend Sheikh Nyanga. First of all, I'd like to also thank you and thank you for your leadership in the work of the Secretariat. Today, we have adopted the report of our committee with respect to the activities carried out from the 2nd of September 2023 to the 31st of August 2024. The draft report before us coincides with a very critical period with respect to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. For almost a year now, our brothers and sisters, the Palestinian people, find themselves in a living hell. During that time, the international community has made multiple appeals to Israel, calling for an end to the massacre and the humanitarian disaster in Gaza, to no avail. On the contrary, with every resolution or appeal, Israel has launched attacks against the Palestinian people in a clear demonstration of their force. We are witnessing a true crime of genocide. As the Chapter 2 of the draft report in the political context points out, Israel, the occupying power, has launched bombing by air, land, and sea, extensive and indiscriminate bombing, which causes an enormous loss of human life as well as destruction, which is described as the most devastating collective punishment of civilians in modern history. In paragraph 9 of Chapter 2, it says that Israel adopted other legal measures to further the occupation through the continued building and expansion of illegal settlements in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, the confiscation of Palestinian lands, the demolition of houses, as well as the displacement of Palestinian civilians. Further on in the same chapter, it says that the continued Israeli attacks destroyed more than 80% of the infrastructure of the Gaza Strip, including hospitals, water and sanitation networks, as well as electricity networks. The restrictions on access imposed by Israel, combined with the military operations underway, have further impeded the relief efforts, adds the report. Nothing can justify such barbaric acts. We are demanding the immediate and permanent ceasefire, as well as the unrestricted delivery of humanitarian aid to Gaza. It's crucial to achieve a ceasefire, to put an end to the violence, the access to unrestricted humanitarian aid, and to avoid the forced displacement of Palestinians from the land which belongs to them by law. We must put an end to the impunity that the government of Israel enjoys, which can only be explained by their confidence that they will not have to be accountable for their actions, as it has the support of the U.S. government as well as other NATO allies. It's unacceptable that the Security Council continues to be unable to comply with their own resolutions to put an end to the crimes committed by Israel, the occupying power, in which the U.S. has always been an accomplice, historically obstructing and using the veto repeatedly to prevent the action of this organ, undermining regional peace and security. The U.S. government must stop using the anti-democratic and obsolete veto power to protect Israel. Repeatedly, they have used unsustainable pretexts which prevent the Security Council from complying with the mandate entrusted to it by the UN Charter without stopping the massacre in Gaza. We continue to call on the Security Council to comply with the responsibility that they have under the Charter with respect to the maintenance of international peace and security. To our colleagues in the committee, and in particular to our Palestinian brothers, we would like to reiterate that we will not relent in continuing to support a broad, just and lasting solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on the basis of a two-state solution which would allow Palestinians to have the right to self-determination and to have an independent and sovereign state with its capital in East Jerusalem and the pre-1967 borders, which would also guarantee the right of return for the refugees. Thank you very much.
Excellency, thank you very much. Cuba has always been at the vanguard in the defense and promotion of the rights of the Palestinians. This is something we really appreciate in the committee. And with my thanks to you, I would like to request you to express our gratitude to your government for that very precious support. Now this leads us to the next item, which is agenda item number 4, update on recent and upcoming activities of the committee. I will inform you of the upcoming events planned by the committee. We will have a bureau meeting with the SG, Secretary General, on the 6th of September. And there will be also a chair statement on the quarterly Security Council open debate on the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question. That will be in October 2024, but we'll have to confirm. We will also hold a capacity building fellowship program for Palestinian officials from the 21st of October to the 29th of November 2024. There will be a committee meeting with the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the OPT, including Jerusalem and Israel, COI, OPTAJI, and several special rapporteurs titled International Legal Responsibilities for Preventing Genocide, Holding Perpetrators of War Crimes Accountable, and for Ending the Unlawful Occupation of Palestine. That would be on the 31st of October, 2024. We also have scheduled a committee engagement with the CSOs, civil society organizations, mid-November 2024, but the date will be confirmed. And as usual, we'll also celebrate the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people on the 26th of November 2024. And there will be also the 79th session of the GA debate on the Palestinian question that will be on the 3rd of December 2024. We also intend to hold an annual Bureau retreat in 2024, early December 2024, and we will confirm the date in due time. There will be a chair statement to the Quarterly Security Council open debate on the situation in the Middle East, including the Palestinian question, in January 2025. And the first committee meeting in 2025, which will have us elect officers and adopt the committee's program of work, and that's scheduled for February 2025. So now let's move to the next item, the last item, I would say, agenda item 5. Any other matters? Are there any issues under other matters that committee members wish to raise? I can see Nicaragua. Excellency, you have the floor.
Muy buenas tardes.
Good afternoon to all of you. Chairman Chica, as always, in Nicaragua, would like to acknowledge your important role, the leadership role that you have carried out in our committee. We have asked for the floor under other matters, simply to acknowledge the importance of the work of the committee, as well as of the Bureau, to, in particular, inform our Palestinian brothers and sisters that they're not alone, that the suffering, the pain of the Palestinian people is our pain and suffering as well. It is the pain of all of humanity, which is being expressed very clearly. We know that this is a very difficult period, that the genocide that is being experienced by the Palestinian people is known now throughout the world. But also, we are convinced, and we know due to our own personal experience, that the Palestinian people will win, that the Palestinian people will be free, and they will have their state, an independent and sovereign state. And here, we would like to ask that we step up our support for Palestine, that we carry out all of the actions that the Palestinian state is asking of us in this assembly and in the next General Assembly. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you. I think it must be acknowledged without demur that you, Ambassador Faisal, Ambassador Feda, and the rest of the Bureau has done some sterling, really fantastic work with regard to this whole business of following up this agonizing event in Palestine. You have steadfastly reported to us in graphic terms as to what exactly the situation is and how serious these consequences are. It was only on the 20th of June that I associated myself in visiting the Baqaa camp in Jordan, and we witnessed firsthand the agonizing trauma that the refugees of this crisis are going through. One of the scenes you will remember walking through the marketplace in the Baqaa camp was when I saw a mountain of shoes and slippers that we were shown in the market. One of us, I think, did ask the question as to what that mound was, because we thought it was a mound of garbage. But we were told that that was for sale. Now, that was really heart-rendering, quite frankly. That footwear that we saw as a mountain of footwear was fit for nothing. But that was what was available to those refugees. Now, I'm narrating this story to demonstrate the agony and the terrible situation the refugees are facing. And we in Sri Lanka would completely support you in everything you do to try and give them a little respite from the agony that they are suffering at the moment. And I must thank your committee for the lead that you've taken to prosecute this whole theme to a logical end, so that appropriate cognizance is taken of the seriousness of what is being played out in Palestine. Because I really think that it would otherwise be a serious indictment on the international community if this situation was to be left unabated, left unattended, really. As for Sri Lanka is concerned, you can be assured that Sri Lanka will give you every support that is possible to try and bring this crisis to an end sooner than later. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, my dear colleagues, excellencies from Nicaragua and Sri Lanka. In your different capacities, the ambassador of Nicaragua is a very strong member of the bureau of this committee, very active. And I also know that Sri Lanka, as a member of this committee, but also as the chair of the Committee on Israeli Practices, both of you are very strong supporters and passionate supporters of the question of Palestine. But your words also are reflecting the commitment of your respective countries to the Palestinian cause. So I would like to thank you for that passion, that engagement, that commitment, and I'm sure together we can continue supporting the Palestinian people, who is now under terrible assault from the Israeli authorities and army. And this is a fight we have to carry on. I don't see any other delegation wishing to take the floor. Since there is no other further matters, this meeting is adjourned. I thank you.